Welcome to the Noir Poise podcast, where wisdom is power is more than just a motto.
It's our way of life. While we don't claim to have all the answers, we're dedicated to delving deeper into different topics through meaningful conversations. As a duo, we bring different viewpoints to the table, enriching our joint journey towards growth and poise.
Join us as we explore and unlearn to relearn while striving to navigate life with poise. I don't know about you, but identity has always been a thing for me growing up. And I finally accepted that I definitely struggled with it up until like a couple years ago.
What do you mean your identity?
My identity meaning like discovering who Ruth actually is, who I am outside of being a sister, who I am outside of being my mom's daughter, who I am outside of being so-and-so's friend, certain roles or, career plans and stuff like that. Like just really discovering me at the core has always been hard for me in the past. Up until maybe like I think 5 years ago, I found parts of me where I'm just like, this is who I am and I'm fully comfortable with this part of me. I've accepted who I am and I love who I am kind of thing. And the path to get there took a lot of confusion, a lot of back and forth, a lot of like questions because we get so caught up in being who we were taught we were supposed to be or being who people think we are or being who people make assumptions and label us as that particular person. And we almost believe it and start to operate in that way. And for me, that was the case. I remember seeing a video where this person was interviewing someone and questioned him like, who is so-and-so, and kind of stated his name. And he gave the general response that we all do, right? Like if someone asks you, who are you? Like, who's Sam?
Yeah, I'll be like husband.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's really like how most people these days answer. You list your different titles, you list your career, you may even list your age and gender, and it's just like, okay, but who are we really outside of being a parent, a sibling, a friend, a professional? Like who are we?
That's the hardest question I think I've ever had to ask myself. I don't know if we're talking about the same video, but I think I saw that video too.
I might have been the one that showed you it.
It could have been where
Yeah.
someone said, when you ask somebody who they are, they'll give you their name, but you're not your name.
Right. You were given that name.
You were given that name.
Exactly.
A lot of people don't know how to answer that. And to be completely honest,
Still learning.
I don't know how to answer that either.
Facts, yeah.
Obviously, we're in season 2, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most impactful feedback I think we've gotten was people saying that they learned a lot about us from the podcast.
Really? That was the best thing?
To me, yes. And it's because I agree with them. I've learned a lot
done.
about myself as well. Just vocalizing things or thinking aloud. I learned that I didn't really know myself. Like I knew what I liked,
Yeah.
I knew what I experienced, but I didn't really know, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I didn't really know who I am. And thinking back on it, I mistakenly assumed that my titles were who I am. There was a time when I was in church and I was preaching. Everyone knew me as a preacher.
Right.
So I felt like I had a preacher identity. And then when I was in school, I was in journalism, everyone would tell me, you're so good at this, you're meant to do this. And I'm like, my identity is a journalist, And then when I get home, I had my own identity. When I'm with you, I had my own identity. So I took on all these identities just out of habit.
Yeah.
And I had to reflect during the first season, like, oh, snap. These are, like you just said, just titles that I had. They're not really who I am.
Right. I hear you. You ever been around someone and you're like, I know this person. I know how they act. This, I know who they are. And you see them around another group of friends and you're just like, you even kind of talking different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I've actually thought about it. I'm like, I think that's happened to me before where I've done it and I've seen people do it as well. for a while, I'm like, you fake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think it really is that whole identity thing where we start to be a version of ourselves rather than just being our entire self. We show different people a part of us.
Is that wrong though?
I mean, I really don't think there's ever like a right or wrong, to be honest with you. Like, to each his own. If it works for someone, it works for someone. But as time has gone by for me, I'm finding that like I don't want to do that. And I don't do that now. For a long time, I would be around like, family or friends or whatever the case is. And I'm like, oh yeah, these type of people I could share this, or I could say these type of things. And then other people I'm like, I'm gonna be a little bit more quiet and to myself and reserved and not give a lot of information. But it's not until like years ago where I would hear people give their perspective on me or what they thought I like. It would be like simple things too. They would kind of like state what they thought I was into or thought I liked or thought how I was. And I don't know if you remember, I would come home and be like, yo, my friends don't know me.
Yeah.
Like, I literally would be like, they really don't know. And for a while, I thought it was them. But I had to realize years ago, I was just like, well, yeah, they're going to still think you're the Ruth that they met, when you guys were teenagers, if you're not illustrating your evolution and you're not sharing that. So for a long time, I had to realize like, yo, the closest people to me don't really know me. Aside from you, to be honest, I'm like, they don't know me. And once I realized that, I started kind of putting a little bit more effort into showing a little bit more and seeing how people receive that information. And then that kind of guided me on how to move forward. But I felt that, and I've heard people actually say that to the point where it's commonly known where some people would be like, yeah, I don't want to mix with my friends.
Yeah,
like I've heard people
the
say that where
thing.
I'm just like, no, those are my work friends. Those are my close friends. Those are my school friends. Those are my this friends. And it's just like, no, I don't mix my worlds.
I gotta mention this.
Here we go. Okay.
But that's why I love this show, Seinfeld, because they actually spoke about that, how you have to keep your worlds apart. Like, you could have the relationship you, and then the independent you. The independent you is the one that has their own separate friends, and the relationship you obviously is the one you and your spouse.
Yeah.
According to
This is my
Seinfeld-
life, guys. Everything we talk about, there's a Seinfeld
Listen,
episode
it's a
about
great
it.
show, so there's a lot of lessons that could be learned. But
Lord.
according to the show, if, for example, if you combine your relationship with your friends, there's one of you that's gonna suffer. So let's say you have,
I can understand it. I think it's a drag though, but I get it.
So
I
let's
get
say
the
you
concept.
have your group of friends, and then now you have your close cousins, and then you have your Haitian aunts and uncles coming in, and then you have your work people come in. Which one of you is gonna show? Because there's gonna be a you that shows, and then the other yous people are gonna look at you like you said, you're fake.
Yeah.
I don't know this you. Who are you? Kind of thing. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know if it's a bad thing to have different identities, but at the same time, who could maintain that?
Honestly, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, but for me, I realize it ain't for me. Like, I just don't have the capacity nor the energy to deal with that kind of like, no, I've really found that it's been beneficial, at least for me, for my peace of mind, to really just find your authentic self. And I think the reason why we do that often is because we haven't yet. We haven't found like the nitty gritty of us. So we kind of gravitate towards the environment we're in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like I said, I realized I was doing that back then without recognizing it. It was just natural. I was just like, yeah, when I'm around these people, they know this side of me. So this is the side of me I'm going to show. When I'm around this side, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was intentionally done. And I'm like, oh no, I got to put on this facade. No, it was just like, I noticed I was more reserved around certain people. And so those people started to not really know who I currently was. They knew who they met. Like, the people in my life, I've known them since I've been a kid, literally. Yeah. Like, I've met most of them around like the 14 to 16 years old era. There's maybe like a few that I met in my early 20s. And then I have my family members, which obviously they've been there since day one. So a lot of times when you do that, people then don't really recognize who you currently are. So with that, for me, while I don't want to sit here and be like, that's wrong, but through my personal experience, I found peace in not operating in that way anymore. Because again, when you find your true authentic self, and that's a process because you'll always keep finding different versions of you as you keep digging deeper. But once I did that, I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to be me. Now I don't force it. When I'm like, if I'm in a space, like if I don't feel like engaging in this activity, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But before, when I was carrying that kind of mindset, I often did a lot of things or participated in a lot of things that did not align with who I was. And it's not anything negative, but like, for example, I'm a homebody. Yeah, I may like to, hang out with people every now and then, but I don't like group settings. And I couldn't understand why I would feel the way that I feel towards the end of being in a group setting or getting home from a group setting. Like the people who known me for a while, I'm sure everyone has experienced a mute experience with me. And a lot of times because they don't know me, they'll always assume that I'm mad. But it's like, no, bro, I'm drained because those are not the environments that feed me. Like it's draining for me.
It's literally work to just keep going through different identities and environments that doesn't represent the real you.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
as you're saying this, is making me think of the time similarly to you where I'm in a group setting and I just want to go home.
Facts. We're just
Like,
like, all right, it's been an hour.
yeah.
I'm ready.
I just think about that
Let's
drive
go.
home and just finally getting
Yeah.
home. You're getting undressed or whatever. You said this to me a while back, and when you first said it, I didn't like it because I thought it was coming from a misguided or misinterpreted way.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned that you weren't a fan of how I acted around other people.
Yeah. I remember
And
that.
at first, I thought to myself, similarly to Seinfeld, like, yeah, I'm in a different world, differently, so I don't know what is it that
I'm done.
you don't like. Although, for example, people labeled me a pastor or a preacher,
Mm-hmm.
although that was part of me, that wasn't who I was.
Right.
But in the back of my mind, I felt like I had to live up to that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Like they say, you always had to have a word, kind of thing.
Right.
Or even
You started operating in those titles.
right. Like even when I would have certain conversation with friends or loved ones, you know me, when we have conversations, we love to go
Yeah,
in depth.
like deeper than what y'all hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I actually have a story. No, let me not cut you off. Go ahead. Go ahead.
don't forget though.
Okay.
I love to go really deep into the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't doing that outside of our relationship for the
Right.
most part.
Yeah.
So that alone drained me as well because now I'm having conversations where I'm saying things
Surface
that
level.
yeah, surface level, or I'm saying things that I know is not 100% what I would want to say, but I'm trying to say
Cater
what
to the person in a
right.
sense.
So all these things I had to realize were draining me. Like you said, like I wasn't able to really be
You.
me.
Yeah.
And as crazy as it sounds, trying to fit different roles,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see it as a bad thing to be reserved with certain groups. Like you have to
Yeah,
know your
yeah.
audience as well.
Definitely.
But one thing that I've learned is be the me that I need to be, not the me that I think people want.
I love that.
And that alone has been a game changer because since I've adopted that mindset and I've had conversations with people, I've noticed that I haven't felt drained. I've enjoyed the conversation, even if there were certain things that I still reserved.
Right.
But I didn't try to cater to my audience anymore instead, compared to just being who I need to be.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point because I think the issue is often that cuz like you said, you're not going to show all of you to everybody. Not everyone deserves you. That's one thing I had to learn too. Not everyone deserves to see every part of you, but it's about not being who they expect you to be, like you just said. Because, like I mentioned earlier, I think that was the thing. I was just like, yeah, these people, they know me as this way. So I'm like, cool, whatever. They make a comment and I don't agree with it. I'm like, whatever. It is what it is. You know what I mean? But I had to look at it and be like, That's probably what's draining me. I mean, that and other reasons, to be honest with you. I know that I just prefer smaller groups, and I'm totally okay with that. It took me a long time to actually accept it. But now I'm just like, if I don't feel like being around a crowd, listen, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's a factor too, like understanding who you are, because sometimes it is the case where you're just kind of, in a sense, like piggybacking off people or doing it for the sake of other people and catering to their view of who they think you are. But sometimes it's also the lack of understanding of who you are too. So there was an aspect of that. And there was also the part of me that didn't want to accept the parts of me that I assumed people wouldn't want to see. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that aspect of it can often cause a lot of confusion. But to get back to the story that I was going to say, I remember a time we went to like a loved one's event. It was a celebration. So we had like a drink or two, and a certain conversation came up. And I'm like, normally, if you didn't have any drink, you would have just kind of like listened to everybody and let them speak. But I'm like, he's had a drink. So now he's like more comfortable. You know how like once you have like a little drink, you become like a little bit
Looser.
yeah, you become a little looser. So I was like, up, he's about to go in. And I'll never forget it, because after the event, there was someone that approached me that was just like, I never thought he thought that way. Like they were like so shocked by what you were expressing and things you were saying pertaining to that topic. But that's pretty much an example of what I meant when I used to say that. Was just kind of like, yes, you don't have to show everyone every part of you, but not putting up a facade at the same time. Like being who you are and true to who you are, despite who's in the room. That doesn't mean I have to overly share. That doesn't mean I have to give specific details about certain questions that you're asking. I can still be reserved and be true to who I am.
So let me ask you, in your opinion, how does someone know or find out who they are? And the reason why I'm asking that is when I was completing each of the roles I mentioned earlier, whether it's preacher, a journalist, a UX researcher, husband,
You almost said
father.
wife.
Yeah, I almost said wife. They go hand in hand, husband, wife. But son, brother. Every time I was fulfilling one of those roles, I felt like this is who I am until I transitioned to the next role, and I'm like, this is who I am. So how does someone eliminate the roles and find out, okay, this is who I am, independent from any of the roles that I have?
I think that's a dope question, because realistically, those roles kind of play a part on who you are, right? If we're honest, like if you're a mom, mom plays a big factor on who you are and how you operate. It affects your day-to-day purpose, so on and so forth. And I think that goes with a lot of the other titles you mentioned. Like these titles to some extent have a part of us in it. But I think it's being able to find the things within those titles that correlate with who you are at the core. So when I think of that, and let me know if I'm not answering, but when I think of that, I think of like purpose, I think of values, I think of morals, I think of transparency, I think of things like that will automatically make you true to yourself, rather than operating in a way that's, in a sense, isn't being stemmed from those core things about you, just to appease that role or just to fulfill that role. So in other words, if you're being a son, right, you can be a great son and still be true to who you are, rather than putting aside your opinions, putting aside your values and morals, and stepping outside of what you believe to fulfill someone else's necessity. You can fulfill those roles by still being the core of who Sam is. That's how I see it. I don't know if I answered the question properly.
And I would just to piggyback off that, I would say I've experienced that my true identity is whatever I'm most at peace with. Whatever I do that gives me the most energy. So if it's having conversations and go really deep into those conversations, if I come out of that and I feel more energetic, then I know, okay, that's a piece of who I really am. But then if I find myself in a situation where after it's over, I feel more drained, then that tells me, yeah, that's not really who I am. There's something about that just doesn't resonate with me. Growing up, how much pressure I faced because I didn't know what to do as a career.
Right.
And I think that pressure stems from society making it seem that your career is
Is
your
your
identity.
identity. Yeah. I mean, as adults, there's so many people that walk around thinking that their career is their entire identity.
Right.
While maybe for some people, it aligns so well with your purpose that you find that that's the case. But in my opinion, career is career.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because one of the main, I would say, pitfalls or blockage of people not realizing who their true identity is that societal pressure. You can't think clearly if you're under pressure.
Right. That's
You're
true.
going to end up making irrational or emotional decisions because you're under pressure. So I wish if I could talk to myself back then, I wish I had the understanding that just because I don't know what to do for my career doesn't mean I don't have an identity.
Identity.
I think that would have saved me so much stress. Saved so many people stress who are in school, transitioning from major to major, transitioning from sector
Yeah.
to sector,
At like
career to career.
17,
Right.
you have to make a decision on what you want to do for the rest of your life. It's so unrealistic. You still haven't figured you out, especially especially with our upbringing where it's just like at what point did you give me time to even figure out who I am aside from church,
Right.
aside from doing certain responsibilities at home, aside from school? Like at what point did you put me in a place to discover who I am?
I heard someone break this down where they were in their 30s, I believe, or their 40s, and they said, I'm such a different person than I was comparing to myself to my early 20s.
Facts.
How in the world does society expect me to make a lifelong decision
At
of choosing
17,
my
18,
career,
yeah.
saying this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life
Right.
at that age? And I
Yeah.
say that just to say how learning your identity is going to take time. It's not a process that you should rush or you can rush.
Yeah.
Try to take notice of what are those societal pressures. If you're a
Yeah.
mom, do you feel the pressure to always, do those traditional mom duties because you feel like this is who you are? Or if you're a father or a man, just, working double shifts or working overtime because you believe this is who I am, this is my role. Just take a moment and breathe and start wondering about when was the last time you felt happy? Or when was the last time you experienced something that made you happy? And just start from there. Again, your career doesn't define who you are. It's a part of you, it's something you do, but it's not you.
Yeah. I think it's just that it's something you do. Like for most people out there, it's really just a 9 to 5 to get the bills paid. And that's one of the things I actually like admire about our generation. Some people may think it's a negative thing, but our generation, they will go through school and realize this isn't it. I'm not with it. I can do this on the side, to get my money up and figure something else out. And they move along to live a life that is fulfilling for them. While I can see why people think it's a negative thing, but I actually find beauty in that because I think it's an important thing to understand that when trying to find your identity, you're evolving, right? So something that you were into at 18, it's okay that it may have been the wrong decision or at least feel like, let me not say the wrong decision because our journey takes us through different paths and we learn lessons and it helps us gain a better understanding of who we are and where we're going. But it may feel like you made the wrong decision or you may have taken the wrong path. Because for me, for a long time, that's one of the things with identity where I aligned it so much with my career and my titles that when those things were not occurring according to how I always expected them to occur, there was that confusion and that, in a sense, sadness where you're just like, okay, so if I thought all along this is what I was going to be doing and this is what I'm meant to do, and now I'm realizing that that's not the case, what am I going to do now? Like you almost end up in a position of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that uncertainty easily leads to sadness. I saw a video of a guy who was basically saying how people don't often recognize that some of the emotions that we go through, it ties with something mentally. And the minute you can discover what it is that's occurring, or at least what it is that is needed mentally and operationally, and you start to work on that, you'll almost realize that the emotional aspect is gone. So, for example, he was talking about sadness and dealing with sadness. When you really break down sadness and why people do get sad, it's because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to move forward, and they're uncertain of what's to come. So once you think of it in a way like, all right, so I don't know what to do, let me start doing research to find some answers. Let me start trying to figure out what it is that I can do about this situation. The minute you start to get answers, the sadness will start to drift away. When I heard that video, I started applying that, because we often think of emotions like sadness, and as a Christian, you're like, all right, I'm gonna pray it away. Okay, you know what I mean? I'm gonna pray it away. I'm gonna avoid dealing with it, or I'm gonna act like it's not there. I'm gonna ignore it. But one thing, if I've learned anything at all with the whole identity exploration, at least for me, is sitting in things rather than running away from it. Sitting in them and comprehending why they're doing what they're doing to you, or why you feel what you feel. And with this title of Finding Identity, I think it's important to have alone time. For me, that worked. I don't know if that's like a standard thing or if it was just like a me thing, but sometimes we really just need to get away from the distractions and have that time to process what it is that we're feeling and where it stems from. And when you understand the foundation of it, you're like, all right, so how can I operationally make a shift? So if I'm sad about this thing because I don't know, because for me, you know this, I was like, my whole life, I thought I was going to be a doctor. My entire life, I don't have a memory of not wanting to be a physician. And I started slowly recognizing that that wasn't the path that was for me when I was 21. I think I was 20 or 21. At this point, I'm almost done with college. I'm already doing the pre-med thing. I'm at the point where now I have to make a decision on what medical schools I want to apply to. And that's when it really started feeling like, this isn't my path. Am I going to go to school for 4 more years for something that I'm not even sure I'm supposed to be doing, or I feel like it's going to align with my morals, my values? And that's what I had to sit in. I worked in a physician office for years throughout my college years. I tried to gain a better understanding. I watched operations, and I realized I wanted to be a physician because I enjoyed helping people. And as a Haitian, you grow up, you know, there's not that many options: engineer, lawyer, doctor. So I'm like, okay, doctor's the one that fits in helping people. I didn't want to be a nurse. So I'm like, why not do the doctor? I thought that that's how I can help people, not recognizing that you can help people in so many different ways. So many different ways. But unfortunately, that's not something that was taught to us. You know, you figure those type of things out as you go through life. And when I got to 20 years old, 21, I remember I think I had a year and a half left. And I'm like, okay, it's either I change my major now and stay longer, or I just push through and then figure it out after the fact. I had already started. I already paid all these, all this tuition, so on and so forth, for textbooks. I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to explain it to my mom. You know what I mean? That's another thing, the pressure. I didn't know how I was going to explain it to my mom. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to finish with the bachelor's. And there was that space of confusion, and all along, I thought this was my identity, and now it's not. What am I supposed to do? How do I move forward? Trying to understand where certain thoughts came from. And of course, it caused sadness, because now I'm like, okay, now my future plans are not going according to what I thought they were going to be. But to get back to that statement that I said, where the gentleman said, sometimes we have to sit in the emotion and process what's causing it mentally and operationally, and then making a shift that way. Rather trying to not be sad, figure out what's causing the sadness, and then learn how to change that aspect of it. It's a process. It takes time. It took a long time because I didn't have that guidance. But now as an adult, where I'm still discovering, and we're all always evolving. In evolving, that alone time is so necessary, because we get so caught up in like the world and what people are saying, what people are doing, that if you don't designate time to spend alone, you will get lost in the chaos without even recognizing, because time flies, you know? We always say this statement now where when you find you, you'll find God. And I take it as important as it is to do devotions and spend time with God, I think it's very important to also spend that time with you and comprehend you. And in doing so, you'll find God through the process of trying to discover some deep-rooted aspects of yourself.
Man, that's a lifelong lesson right there. Like,
I'm done.
No, I'm really sitting here just soaking it all in, because the times when I felt sad, you're right, it's because I didn't know what to do next. And oftentimes it just stopped there. But I'm literally thinking about, okay, what makes you sad? Because I'm going to go research.
I'm
how
done.
to change that. I do love the saying, someone said this before, where I was looking for God and I found myself. And then by finding myself, I found God.
Yep.
So even
It
the Bible
always
says,
ties in.
seek
Yeah.
first the kingdom of God.
Right.
And what did Jesus say? The kingdom of God is within you. So it's all about learning who you are and finding your own identity.
Right. I love that. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you for spending your time with us. We hope you gained some knowledge today that'll promote poise in your life. We have new episodes uploaded every Thursday right here, same place, same time. Until next time, you can follow us on Instagram at Noir Poise Podcast to stay connected. That's NOIRPOISED Podcast. We'd love to hear your feedback.
And remember, your wisdom is power.